ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the North Rock Special School Board meeting and workshop where the Dr. Gregory Pileski is the proud superintendent. At this time, are there any public comments? Are there any public comments? Are there any public comments? If not, I will officially call this meeting to order. Thank you. At this time, Ms. Colquitt, would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Williams?
Here.
Ms. Walker?
Here.
Dr. Reddish?
Here.
Mrs. McLean?
Here.
Ms. Temple?
Here.
Person West?
Present.
Mr. Skill?
Executive closed session. The executive closed session per North Rock School District Policy 1.14A stating that private or closed discussion by the board may occur as part of a regular or special board meeting. Executive sessions may be held only for the purpose of considering employment, appointment, promotion, demotion, discipline, or the resignation of an employee, or to discuss matters of pupil punishment if requested by the parent or legal guardian. No resolution, agreement, or motion considered in the executive session shall be legally binding unless the board reconvenes in a public session and presents the item for vote of the membership. Further, Arkansas Code Title 25, Chapter 19, Section 106.2, C1 states, the specific purpose of the executive session shall be announced in public before going into executive session. Please join me in the executive closed session for discussion of the following matters: employment, appointment, promotion, demotion, the discipline or the resignation of an employee.
Okay. Madam President, members of our Board of Education, our action items for new business. The first action item is 5.1, the employment of personnel. The superintendent recommends the employment of personnel as discussed in executive closed session.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I so move that we accept the items on personnel discussed in the executive session.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded that we accept 5.1 employment. Those in favor say aye. Opposed? None, so the motion is carried.
Thank you, Madam President, members of our Board of Education. The next action item is 5.2. This is a draft proposed policy 8.46 on classified, from the Classified Personnel Policy Committee. And then I'll refer to my colleague, Mr. Smith, our esteemed Executive Director of Human Resources that works with both our LPPC and CPPC, to give a brief update as to why this is an action item at this time.
Yes, sir. So, Madam President, Dr. Paluski, members of the board, thank you for having me this evening. I know it is normally our practice to bring a policy change to a workshop and then later bring it back to a regularly scheduled board meeting. There is a reason why this is being brought as an action item tonight, and you guys are first seeing it. So we just went through our formation process for both the LPPC and CPPC, as is designated by law in our policies. So we have met for the first time, and we are in the process in which we are kind of in the election phase. Well, everyone is aware that the new LEARNS Act came out, and here, forthcoming to the board, I will be bringing the prospective policy changes that will be affected this upcoming year going into the next that were brought about by LEARNS. This is one of such changes. So the LPPC brought the formation policy last year and addressed a couple of these things. The CPPC did not act on that last year. What we are asking the board to change within the policy is the red, which says each of the 5 representatives will serve a 3-year term limit. By October 15th of each year, an election will be held to fill any of the 5 classifications that will not have an active representative. So this is, again, changed by law. We are asking that the board approve this change for term limits, so those members that are elected going into this year will be under a 3-year term, and that will be the clarity that is provided. The other changes in regards to this policy will be voted on by the new committee that is elected by the classified staff. I'll be happy to take any questions at this time.
Ms. McLean?
I don't have any questions.
So for clarification, we're making this emergency change due to the Arkansas LEARNS Act of the requirements.
Of the law to require term limits embedded within your policy. Yes, ma'am.
Very good.
Dr. Reddish?
No questions.
No questions.
Nada.
Okay, the only question I have, the process, have the classified people voted on this?
The CPPC did vote on this. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's clarity. Okay, if there are no further questions, we need to put it to a motion, please.
Madam
Madam
Chair, go ahead.
Yes.
You sure? Madam President, I
Yes.
so move that we accept the Personnel Policy Committee. Hang on, let me look at it. 8.46 from the classified.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded that we accept the classified personnel changes and recommendation for 5 representatives to serve a 3-year term by October 15th each year. An election will be held to fill any of those 5 classifications that will not have had an active representation. Those in favor say aye. Opposed? None, so the motion is carried.
Thank you, Madam President, members of our Board of Education. Thank you, Mr. Smith and Ms. Cherry, who's just arrived, our president of CPPC. I want to recognize her.
Okay.
Madam President? No worries. Got it passed.
Jacob's
for you.
trying to get your attention.
Madam President, members of our Board of Education, the last action item is 5.3, legal transfer. The superintendent recommends to approve the legal transfer as presented to you.
Madam President,
Yes.
I so move that we accept the legal transfer. 5.3.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded that we accept the legal transfer 5.3. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None, so the motion is carried. Thank you. Adjournment?
Madam Chair, I move that we adjourn and go into workshop.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second that we adjourn and go into the workshop. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. So the motion is carried. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President and members of our Board of Education. Now, as we transfer into our workshop, we do have 3 information items. I would just request to the board a change in the order. If we may start with information item 1.2, which is the North Little Rock High School Arena Air Conditioning Project Update. If we may start with that first. Okay.
That's fine.
I'll call Mr. Brown, we might as well have everybody. Mr. Brom, our colleagues from Baldwin and Shell, and making his first debut at our Board of Education meeting, Coach Wes Ballon. We're going to welcome Coach up here because we are talking about the arena, our new director of student athlete development, who's doing a great job. And Mr. Brown, I'm going to kind of probably start off with you, just for the record to the public that, we had a healthy building assessment report done about a year ago. One of the things that it suggested was the air quality in the arena, as the board has approved through ESSER funds. And so we've been in that process. We were supposed to start, I think, in the summer, but some things had been delayed, supply chain, all of that. So we wanted to provide a board and the public an update as it relates to where we are with the project and when the project's going to get done. So, Mr. Brown, I'm going to turn it over to you, and then we'll go from there.
Correct. Thank you, Mr. Superintendent, members of the board. We are going to give you a verbal update on the HVAC project at the arena. And just as a reminder, the funding source on this is partially out of ESSER, partially out of state partnership funding. So there's not an impact to operating on this. There has been a delay in getting that project started. We thought we'd bring you an update on that. We've got Alex from Baldwin and Shell. He's going to bring you up to speed on, we've recently met and discussed the options for this project. And given that basketball season was starting and we're had a bid out for state tournament, that we've made some modifications to that. So I'll turn it over to Alex at this time.
Y'all got me nervous now. So as far as the
Mr. Alex, would you please state your name and who you work for the record, sir?
well, my name is Alex Rogers. I work for Baldwin and Shell. I'm the project manager for the HVAC project. As far as an update on that project, so we did have some delays in material, most notably the HVAC units themselves, and then of course structural steel. After it was brought to our attention that we were going to have issues with getting the bid with the tournament, we thought it to be in our best interest and, well, all of our interests to go ahead and delay that project till after the tournament to avoid having any headaches and any, well, frayed hairs or anything like that. We do believe that we can start work earlier than that on the concourse level, the court level on the mini splits units, and then the replacement of the water heaters in the locker rooms. I'm working with the subcontractors now to schedule that work. It's my hope that we could probably get that done by at least November 13th, which I believe is the first day on our schedule for basketball.
So I think, as we discussed, and that's why we got Coach here, there's going to be no impact to our student athlete winter sports season. And maybe, Coach, a lot of people don't know we're going to be hosting. Can you talk about what we're going to be hosting for the?
Sure. Yes, sir. And so every year there's the state tournament, and it rotates from the central part of the state to the north part of the state, and it's the Central's turn to host. Jonesboro, it's actually their turn, but they're having a bunch of construction done, so they couldn't do it. So it's kind of the expectation that North Little Rock is going to host, and I gladly said yes, we will. That bid doesn't happen until the end of the year, into January. It's going to take a lot of hands on deck to do that, but I think our community wants that, so I'm all on board. However, we can't have construction going on, less parking, and a mess if we're going to pull something like this off. So we met. My recommendation was, if you can do things that aren't going to impact that, go for it. If not, can we just wait? And so that's kind of what we've all talked about, and I think that's what we got, what our plan is. So, any questions?
Just one, a rough ballpark on the projection. We'll get some work done, as you mentioned, Mr. Alex. We'll get through the basketball season, and then we'll get back on track. Any estimation right now, give or take? I know some stuff could happen. Projected ballpark in the spring, when we be completely up and running with our AC.
We plan on starting work in March, so I would say we're looking at April or May on finishing, depending on if we run into any issues as far as when we start work. So,
Perfect, just in time and when it gets hot here in Arkansas. So.
okay, right on time.
Ms. McLean?
Does this impact the bottom line cost
No,
with this delay?
no, ma'am.
No? Okay.
So refresh my memory. This was supposed to be done over the summer, correct? And then because of delays, this is where we are now. We're looking at possibly March for starting, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So even if we go ahead and do what we were speaking of doing as far as the hot water heater and splitting whatever we need to do, whatever that is, this will not impact student learning. This won't come in contact with our students. Not to be disrespectful, but the companies that we bring in, do we even have them do background checks before they come in with their employees on ours? I'm not opening that Pandora box. I'm just throwing that out there. So I want to make sure that it does not impact our students, period. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
So with that being said, I understand the delays. We've all been there. I hate it. But this is where we are. So moving forward, we're going to go ahead and start the project, do what we can. It's not going to be minimum impact. We're still going to host state tournament. It's going to be awesome. North Little Rock's going to be amazing. And we're moving on. And come March, it's going to be a construction zone. Summing it up, is that about right?
Essentially, yes, ma'am.
Cool.
All right.
I just, to your one point, I mean, everybody still has to go through Raptor, right? That's why we have it in there. So we'll work with all of our contractors like we normally do. So just to ease your mind, it's a good question.
Okay, Dr. Reddy?
When is state tournament?
It's on the sheet I gave you.
March?
I don't have it in front of me. It's
February?
first week of March, maybe. Now, I do want to be clear on this. So we have not received, we have to bid on it. But everybody in our conference knows that we're bidding, and typically it's kind of a gentleman's agreement. We've had that meeting. Everybody's expecting us to bid. They know we want it.
March 8th,
So
state finals.
that we won't know 100% that we get it until I believe it's in January.
So this is what we usually go to Hot Springs for?
That's the championship.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
So we're hosting the pre.
Yeah, all the
Preliminaries.
yes.
Semifinals.
It's called the state tournament. That's the considered the finals. So,
Gotcha.
like last year, it was in Rogers, and then the year before, it was in the central part of the state. It was at Southwest High School.
Gotcha.
So it goes back and forth, central, and so
Gotcha.
we hosted. The last time we hosted was in 2018.
Okay.
It was when Lil Tracy we won the state tournament when he was a senior.
I was just
Oh, that was a
curious
while ago.
of the timing because even though hopefully it won't be hot.
Okay. Ms. Temple? Ms. Temple?
Now, I'm just curious, if for some reason we don't host, can we start the project as soon as you find out you weren't hosting?
Well, so the state tournament to me is not the big thing. It's the whole basketball season.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just the final. That's just the kind of the end. That just is going to probably bring in even more traffic.
Yeah.
And it would be like right in the heart of their work. So, but the whole season, I mean, you can see on the schedule I gave you. We start in November. Varsity doesn't really get started good at home until January with conference. But you still have junior high games. We could maybe move them to the other gym. It's just not worth all that. We've gone 20-something years without it. At this point, since we know we're going to get it, I would like to just have the season for our athletes and our coaches, and then be ready to go.
And then just one more, I'm curious, hot water heaters, are we moving them for air conditioning or something?
They're being upgraded. The systems now are many, many years old. They're original to the building. And so we're updating the capacity and the efficiency of those units. So we're ready to move on those, and I think we'll be able to get those installed before the middle of November when the gym will start being used for basketball. And I think the first game is a 9th grade game in the 13th of November. So we'll be done with the hot water portion of that, and so the concessions will be back online the showers will be back online, so.
All right, okay, thank you.
Ms. West?
I have no questions.
I have a follow-up, if you're okay.
Okay.
So, only because you mentioned it again, dadgummit. The hot water heater, is it an endless hot water heater?
They're instant hots.
Okay, cool.
The what?
That's the best thing ever.
What did you say
It is mine is too.
Instant.
Oh, instant, okay, gotcha. I know they had instant.
Okay. If there are no further questions, I certainly appreciate you gentlemen for
Thank you, Mr.
doing the
Alex.
job. Being visionary, Mr. Director.
Student
You
athlete
are the
development.
Director of Student Athletic Department and Academic Engagements. Thank you for being visionary, that we can move forward and bid for things that will enhance our school district. And thank you, Mr. from Baldwin and Shells.
Mr.
to keep
Alex.
us just. We see you all the time. Every time we see you, it's like money, okay? Okay. And Mr. Brown, thank you for your services. Again, thank you, gentlemen. Do you have any questions you want to confirm I ask us?
No,
If
ma'am.
not, you're excused.
Thank you for the schedule.
You're welcome.
Yes.
Thank you,
Oh,
gentlemen.
and thank you for the raising cane. That was real nice the other night. That was I got a lot of good feedback from that.
Has everybody joined the social media, Instagram and Facebook, North Little Rock Athletics? We started that less than 2 weeks ago. So we're starting to push stuff out on that, so.
Good job,
Put that
Coach.
plug out.
Oh, we don't know you coaches. You haven't shared the coaches. You know, this is who is in my department. Defensive back, linebacker coach. You know, that'll be good. That's good advertisement for us.
Okay.
He's,
You know, we'd like to see that. I be on there, I be trying to figure out who it is, the guy in the black jacket, is he the coach? So, you know, since everybody's being positive, let us get something positive about there, who the coaches are.
Okay.
We don't know them. We know the players because they got the names on the back. Do we?
it's a good suggestion.
Well, we got a roster out,
Okay.
didn't we, Dr. Rose?
We did.
All
I'll
right,
work
but-
on it.
But thank you,
Yes,
and
ma'am.
just
Thanks,
keep
Coach.
on pushing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Alex.
Tell me again what it was called, North Little Rock what?
NLR Athletics,
NLR Athletics, okay.
Facebook and Instagram.
You're doing a great job, Mr. Bylon.
Thank you.
And if you wasn't, I would tell you.
Lord help.
Okay,
Madam President and members of our Board of Education, our next action item, which we've now is really 1.2, is our capital improvement project priorities. You know that we've been on this large discussion about potentially a brand new middle school or middle school project. So we wanted to come back and provide you with an update based upon the last time that we met and some information you've provided for us that we wanted to provide you with an update. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Brown, Mr. Brom, and Mr. James, all from Taggart Architect. And Mr. Brown, we'll start with you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Paluski, members of the board. We're going to just do an update. I'm going to do a little recap for you on information that we covered regarding the North Little Rock Middle School project. 2021, the district included this project in our facility plan that was submitted to the state. In 2022, the board began public discussions of a possible middle school project. We were waiting for a May 1 state partnership decision to be announced. Then there was the state partnership. They did meet, the commission met, and if you recall, they were funding new partnership projects at $200 per square foot. They increased that to $289 per square foot. On May 10th, the state partnership funding was announced. North Little Rock was not funded in that initial announcement because the funding ran short for the state. Then in July, on July 20th, the Division of Public School Academic Facilities and Transportation, they met and approved a rule revision that allowed some partnership funding to be reorganized. After that rule change and some of the partnership money returned by schools that were awarded that could no longer, had decided not to utilize their funding, North Little Rock's project was awarded on the 20th. We were awarded $20.8 million for a 110,000 square foot project. The project that we have that we're discussing now is about 130,000 square foot. There is a project agreement that was executed within 60 days of that July the 20th. The next deadline is a January 20th, 2025. We have to have construction must begin. That can be either a contract or a construction management contract signature, but the construction must begin by that date, and then it must be completed by July the 20th, 2027. That's 4 years from the initial award date of July the 20th, 2023. And again, these two dates with asterisks, with evidence, you can make a waiver request from the division. They can extend those dates if they deem necessary. In August of this year, you all were presented information by Mr. Tessman from Archford Facilities on the funding notice. Taggart Architects was here to discuss potential construction budget and timeframes. Mr. Beardsley was here, and myself to discuss the revenue needed to fund that new middle school project. Additionally, at the August 3rd board workshop, the board reviewed some potential site plan construction designs. The board decided not to pursue that November 2023 millage election, and they asked us to consider community forums, community survey, and evaluate if using portables could shorten construction time and be more cost efficient and effective in that plan that was presented. So we're going to address these three items here this evening. So we had multiple construction designs that Taggart's going to cover. I'm going to pull those up here. And then I'll turn it over to Mr. Cahey and Mr. Meyer from Taggart.
Good evening, Madam President and members of the board. I'm Bram Cahey with Taggart Architects. I've been before you twice to discuss the development at the middle school and talk about the options there. And from the last board meeting, we heard that the timeline was too long. We had a linear path of construction where we take one building down and build back in that place. And that allowed for everyone to be in school and not disrupted for any of the components of the construction. But that extended the timeline out to about 4 years. And so it was discussions from the board that time. We heard what you were saying, and we went back and investigated other ways that we could manipulate the site and the construction in order to shorten that timeline. What would that mean? What would portables be brought in to mean? And so we've done some analysis on the same building components, but done in different ways. And so this evening, I've brought James Meyer, who's a partner at my firm and the architect designer. And he's been the genesis behind all of the renderings and things that you've seen and all the design ideas I've presented to you. So now that we're getting more in depth, I'd like to introduce him to the board and have him present how we've looked at these different options to address the concerns of the board.
Good evening. I'm James Meyer, as Bram has very kindly introduced me. It's my first time in front of you, so please be
As the
gentle.
genesis. I mean,
yeah,
that's
right. He's using big words. I'm like writing them down. Maybe I need to record it for my next intro. But we thank you all for your time and the opportunity to work on these. I think there's a lot of exciting things for the district and for really the community that we get to talk about, and really after this dig in the depth of what it means to have a new middle school. So if you want to go to the next slide.
You can take this out if you want.
Oh, look at that. I don't know.
Just
if
slide
that's
it out.
Safe.
It's safe. It ain't going to bite you.
All right. Excellent. Thank you. Feel like I'm back at karaoke or something. All right.
Please don't sing.
No one wants me to sing. You will all leave. I promise. All right. So I'm going to flip around this, and I'm going to trust that Brian's going to flip through the digital images for you, and all this will work. So as you're aware, this is the existing middle school campus. You're aware of its challenges and of its successes. And so we're going to move quickly forward to the planned version that you saw the last time. And so we're just going to go through our options and what those things mean. And then at the end, we're going to go to a summary slide where we talk about cost and duration of each of these options. And so this plan was generated with the idea that we would lose no services and no buildings before the replacements were built. And so to be able to do that without affecting school, without putting in portables, took us about 4 phases. So we had to take down the theater, build 7th and 8th grade. That allows us to take down the 7th and 8th grade building, build the 6th grade and media centers. That allows us to take down the 6th grade building, build the gymnasium structure. That allows us to take down the gymnasiums and build kind of the farming program, the food education program, and then the additional play space for 6th graders. So that allows us to get all of the recreation space in our kind of protected courtyard. It also allows us to look down the hillside towards the neighborhood, so that's a nice little perk. But it takes a long time, and I'll tell you now, as we get to the end of it, it's the most expensive option. So, rightfully so, y'all asked us to look at some additional options. And I'm going to go through all of them, and at the end we're going to talk about ones we recommend and ones we don't recommend. This option takes 2 primary phases, but it requires putting 7th and 8th grade core classrooms into portables. So what that means, if you look in the bottom, we'll take down these 2 buildings first in red, so the 7th and 8th grade building, the theater building, and we're going to have to put 40 portable classrooms out into the parking lot, and there's space to do it where the buses loop, so that's fine. But that's going to be a challenging education environment, just being honest here. So that allows us to build 7th and 8th grade, the 6th grade, and then the combo media and admin building right where we were. And so once that is complete, it allows us to demolish the 6th grade building and the gymnasiums and to build the new one. So that's 2 phases. It's faster, but we got 40 portables for probably a couple of years. So that's difficult. Also difficult is flipping paper. All right, great. Perfect. All right, so this 2-phase option looks at what if we put 6th grade into portables instead. So that would allow us to put 20 core classroom portables out in the parking lot, take down the theater building, take down the 6th grade building, build that L shape just flipped to the north. And so that would allow us to get the classrooms open faster. Then we can come back, take down 7th and 8th grade, take down the gymnasium buildings, and build our recreation spaces between the gym, shelter, and then the play areas. The challenge with that we see is you're taking your most vulnerable students on a middle school campus, 6th grade, the ones just entering the middle school, and putting them out in the parking lot in portables. It's just not a great option, especially at an age period where it's probably the most difficult to keep students in your district. So we said, all right, we're smarter than this. Can we come up with a shorter phase option without requiring any portable classrooms? And so there's a caveat in this. We're going to have to take down the theater building to be able to get it done without portable classrooms. We also have to take down the gymnasium. It's a little it's not ideal, but the option may be what is best for us. If we build both of those buildings down, we're able to build a 7th and 8th grade building, a 6th grade building, connect them via a new front porch colonnade to be able to organize all the circulation on the site, have better visual control, and then in the second phase, we'll take down the existing classroom buildings, put the gymnasium and media and specialty spaces up on the north end of campus with a new farm space. That allows us to set up this great central courtyard. So now, instead of it being enclosed and hidden and feeling dangerous and unsure what in the world's happening back there, it's now open to the public. It's now your front door. This begins to set itself up like you would see a lot of small collegiate settings. So it was a really great campus for learning. So we're excited about that opportunity. Taking it one step further, if we look at taking down both of those buildings, we now have the full width of that courtyard that we can work with, and we believe that we can get it done in a single phase with a single building. And so what that does is we have a building that's organized as a series of fingers and they're connected by public spaces. And so we'll have a first mini building for 7th and 8th grade. The next one will be 2 stories for admin in 6th grade. Then we'll go into media. Then we'll go into the gymnasium. Extra pluses, besides it being in single phase, you now no longer have acres and acres of covered canopies going between buildings to get to the cafeteria because they connect. So we're able to keep students from having to walk in the rain on bad days and all that kind of thing. It gives us a single diversified entry and drop-off point. Since we have one building, we're able to pull back, get greater drop-off space here. And so instead of having to have drop-off on the north end and the south end, we would have a central spine with a walkway. And so 6th grade could have parent drop-off on one side, and 7th and 8th grade could have it on the others. So now we have less points where we have interactions, so we can use less staff to police having drop-off and pick-up. It's simpler, we have more stacking space, and we can still have the buses come through here. One of the other things with these 2 phases that we've talked about is now that we've kind of unlocked this little valley back here where we have playground area, we can continue this drive as a loop around the school and make it simpler for either additional bus drop-off or public events at the gym if you need to have teens come on the backside or leave. So it starts to unlock flexibility for the campus because we're using less of the land for buildings. All right, Ron, where's my next one? All right.
I like options.
We like options too. It's fun. Okay, so these are smaller, but in general, we have the first phase, 4-phase option that you saw from us over here in the purple. The 7th and 8th grade portables is in orange. 6th grade portables is in pink. The no core classroom portables is in blue. And then the single phase is in red. And so down at the bottom, and this should all be in your packets, we have kind of a list of anticipated costs, construction timelines, and contingencies. And so when we look at options we would recommend, we're going to tell you, if we were in your shoes, we're going to pick a layout option where we're not putting a large percentage of our students in portables for a couple of years. Especially if we can avoid it, we think that's a big win. And the added plus to that is, since we're not buying portables, we're not touching more of the site, they're actually our 2 cheapest options. And so at this moment, if we look at the single phase, larger building structure, we're anticipating a project cost of $65.5 million. If we look at the 2-phase kind of collegiate option, we're looking at $66.8 million. So they're about $1.5 million apart, and that's all high-level information at this point. What we would recommend is for the board to consider going forward with the study for both options so that it can be tested for grades, it can be tested for existing utility connections, and it can be vetted based on more existing condition information than we have at the moment. So, in general, just the sum, go back up. If we did the 2-phase with 6 or 8 options, we're looking at nearly $70 million. If we go to 7th and 8th grade portables, we're over $70 million. And the original 4-phase is 70.2.
Building we're tearing down.
Sure. So part of what we will need to look into, in the existing 7th and 8th grade building, there's a wing right here that we'll have to determine which building, if any of these will require that wing to be closed. Additionally, in the theater building, there are some specialty classrooms that are kind of supplemental classes that will either need to find space in the existing buildings, or we may need a handful of portables that those things like band or something move into. And so that's something we can dig into further detail at the next level of study.
But instead of having an entire grade in portables, you would just, the student would go there maybe once a day,
Right.
or whatever period that was out there. It would be like a use-specific type portable.
More questions, Dr. Pitt?
No, ma'am, that's, I think at this, or Brian, you want to just share, kind of, why don't you finish this out with, once we get feedback from the board, but what we're recommending based upon tonight, and then we can have a larger discussion, especially about the community forums.
Okay, so here are the next steps that we have mapped out. So if you all agree, if we just by a nod of a head, if you all agree that the two options that Taggart are recommending, that they study more and get more detailed information, we'll proceed with that. And then we also have community survey that we're planning to send out the week of November 1st. We also have some community forum meetings that we are planning to have between now and November 1st. We have those dates and locations outlined in the PowerPoint here. October the 12th will be a virtual. It'll be a hybrid meeting. It'll be a virtual meeting but there'll also be an in-person meeting available. So people could choose whether they wanted to attend that meeting or do it virtual. October the 17th at Lakewood, October the 23rd, Glenview, 24th, 7th Street, and the 30th at Ridge Road. Then the board, then what we'll need to talk about is a decision. We were talking about revenue that was needed for this project. One of the things the board has to consider is when you would like to pursue the millage election with the public. So in 2024, you have two options. You either have March or you have November. If you plan to do the March meeting, the March election, then that requires a decision by the board by the November 23 regular board meeting. If you choose the November 2024 election, that would require a decision by the board by the July regular board meeting. So those are sort of the next steps where we have some preliminary design and ideas. We would like to pursue the ones that are recommended, the least expensive and the best on timeline options that we have identified with Taggart. We'd also like to pursue the community survey and the community forums that we have, and the sort of
Ms. Glenn?
I don't know if this is too specific a question, but on the plans, I see on phase 1, the gym.
Yes, ma'am.
It appears to have 2 gym spaces. Is that correct?
It certainly could. So these site plan studies, we used kind of the same blocks of program that we had from the program of requirements. And so there is one that's like a space that's set up for a dedicated gym and bleachers and whatnot that we have to decide if we want the bleachers. The other space kind of in front of that was originally drawn as a pre-function space because it was a building out on its own. So say you were hosting a tournament, you had 80 people attending, they needed somewhere to mill around. So in the previous versions, that pre-function space was necessary for the program to have people. Here, being attached to another larger building, that could very easily be gobbled back up into making a second play surface.
So on phase 2, the gym area looks to me in this drawing like there's 4 spaces.
We'll have to look
4
at it.
gym spaces.
So it's
is
two.
Is
Outdoor.
this the one that's on the screen? Is that what you're talking about?
Is it the
I'm
two
on
phase
this. I'm on this sheet right here
Here, let me get to
at
it.
phase 2.
This one, ma'am?
Yes.
Okay.
And the
So
gym
that's
up there
phase-
looks like it's divided into 4 different gyms.
It's really 2 courts right next to each other, and you're just seeing the boundary lines touched. That's why it looks like it's 4. But that is the same square footage in orange as the one phase. So, meaning to say, we can fit 2 gyms, 2 basketball courts within any of those orange squares. So 1 phase, 2 phase, 2 phase with portables, we could make all of those have 2 basketball courts.
What if we needed more than 2?
Then we have to talk about how we're balancing our budget, our programming, and our square footage. And so it's the next phase of study. Right now, those orange gym rectangles are based purely on what the program of requirements says you have to have. The next step in all of this is to go meet with faculty and staff at the school and talk about what you want and what you need. Because what you, as a school, need is going to be different than what the state says. And so we need to come to grips with those 2 differences. Just how our first program of requirements study said that the state was going to require us to have 128,000 square feet of program, but when they funded us for 110,000 square feet. So what's that 18,000 square foot difference? And so that's some of this next step of study, is understanding that finer grain of detail.
Okay, and thus, if as you start talking with the teachers on the campuses, and they say, yeah, we need 4 gyms, let's say. So then suddenly you have to redo this, and the amount of money it costs may change then.
That's correct.
Because then you are going to increase your square footage.
Yes, ma'am.
So what we're looking at right here on phase 1 and phase 2, how many square feet are we looking at in each of those?
Both phases are for 130,000 square feet.
So these are 130.
Yes,
the
ma'am.
state funded us for 110.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And that 130 was generated by looking at the state program of requirements. So
Right.
That's where I'm saying we've got to
Right.
do a little bit of investigation on what are they seeing differently than we did.
So that really comes in the next phase.
Yes, ma'am.
And just to jump in, Mr. Miles, you're referring to like ed spec. So there's, with certain programs, there's a minimum requirement that's required by the state for education or curricular programs. I think that's what you're referring
Yes, sir.
to is
That is
for
when,
PE.
when we
there's
go for partnership funds, we're given a spreadsheet. And that tells us, okay, if you have this many students anticipated in your district, you need so many classrooms at X number of square feet. And so like a general core classroom is 850 square feet. And so if you had one that was 800 square feet, the state is going to say it doesn't count, and they're not going to pay you for it.
Right. The other thing that I ask is, I know everything seems to be running north and south, and I'm always concerned about east and west and the heat that comes from east and west here in the south, and what kind of windows are going to be in there. Because I know in some of the elementary schools that we built, we had, for example, technology rooms. This may be in the next phase, what I'm talking about now.
It is, but it's good information to hear.
But I know we have schools that, like, for example, a computer lab is put where the sun comes beating in. You already have a lot of heat that's coming from just the technology itself that's in that space. And so when I see things running north and south here, that just
Certainly.
sends up a red flag to me, because we're so concerned about energy right now and what the energy is going to cost for this. And I know the potential in the future of using some solar energy and how that needs to be oriented. But
Yes, ma'am. And what I would comment is, yes, that definitely comes once we finalize the program and we begin looking at building form. But what I would counsel you is there's 3 or 4 ways that we take care of that with most buildings. And honestly, the simplest and most effective is what we call passive solar design. So we're not going to do wide windows that face east and west, because those are what accept the low sun angle. We do vertical windows, and we try to make sure that there are projections near those windows so that they're self-shading from the south side. And so there's a lot of ways that we can include smart building design to take care of that without paying for extra stuff. And so maybe a good example is our office building downtown, corner of 6th and Main. Big glass windows, face dead west, and we had to come up with several kind of creative ways to control that, because our job is working on a computer screen. If you have a bright window behind it, you're toast. And so how you manage glare in that is a big part of our job. It's kind of where we get to have fun, because it's problem solving on a different level. But that's certainly something that will be integrated once we get to building design.
Okay, well, that's music to my ears.
Good. Glad to be able to help.
Okay, thanks.
Ms. Walker.
So it's my understanding that when we decide on our dates, that we're going to go before the public and we're going to pretty much pitch them phase 1 and phase 2, because that's what's being recommended.
That would be our recommendation.
Okay. So with that being said, this is not the final design.
Correct.
So once we start talking to the community, we start chit-chatting with our teachers, and we know we need more gym space, period. We know that. We can argue all day long with the state, but that is what we're going to fight for. We need more gym space. So with that being said, we're not there yet. That's going to be like phase 2, phase 3, whatever it may be down the road. But this is just a preliminary. This is a ballpark picture.
Yes.
This is just a ballpark idea in order for us to come to the community and say, this is what we need, this is what we're looking at, which one do you prefer?
Yes, ma'am. That's it exactly. These drawings exist to provide you a picture and a framework for that conversation. Because this is just going off what the state tells us. That's not our parents, that's not our pupils, that's not our staff.
Right. Thank you.
And I would say just to that, Ms. Welcome, that's where we are in this next phase, is just we want to have this same dialogue and conversation with our public about, here's the information we have right now. This is not final.
Right.
As we go into phase 2, we got a lot of parent, teacher input as far as what the actual design is going to, and that will come out of that. So that's what these forums are for, is just taking everything that you all know to this point and making sure we're sharing the same thing with the public, which is what the board had requested.
Dr. Reddy.
Just for clarity, just looking at the pictures, if I'm looking at phase 2, there's more space between the 6th grade and the 7th and 8th grade campus?
Yes, ma'am. They're separated by the existing courtyard.
Okay. On the 7th and 8th grade, is it 2 levels where 7th is on one level and 8th is on another?
So
How are we keeping them separated?
that level of detail will be determined through the building program. It could either be, if you look, there's kind of 2 knuckles joined by a skinnier space. And so that skinnier space is intended to be where the stairs are, where we may be able to have an indoor-outdoor classroom. And so there's 2 ways to organize a classroom. You either have all 7th grade on the first floor, all of 8th grade on the second, or we can call those 2 houses that are joined by a piece of glass. And so there's 2 floors of 7th grade and then 2 floors of 8th grade.
But there will be a separation
Yes,
between the two.
there's a room between them, or there's a stair between them.
There's something separating
Yes.
the grade levels.
And I think, Dr. Reddy, one of the things that we heard, at least when I arrived, was because of the complex, the way that it is, we got to try to create as much small and separation between grade levels as much. So your point is very valid. As Mr. Meyer says, these are upstairs or downstairs or completely almost 2 small buildings within one.
That's the main thing that I'm looking at, keeping the 6th grade with the 6th grade, and the 7th grade can't cross over, and vice versa.
That's right.
Yes, ma'am.
Keeping them separated.
Small schools.
And so that's why even in this one-phase building where there are kind of dominoes stacked up, there's 60 feet between those buildings. That's a courtyard with grass or trees or gravel or something where, hey, you can't just go straight across and harass somebody.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Ms. Temple.
Okay. Well, I like all of them. Phase 1, I'm concerned about all the additional traffic coming in that area. Even though there'd be 2 different pathways, I'm just concerned about the amount of traffic that would funnel over that way, because it gets pretty stacked
Yes,
up
ma'am.
on both sides.
The intent is, and it'll probably show up when it gets to be a full real plan instead of just the buildings, that there will be a lot more stacking space on campus than there is currently. And so our goal would be that we keep the cars off the street. I mean, you never can do it perfectly, right? It's kind of like a highway. You could add as many lanes as you want. More people are just going to drive at the same time. But we're gonna do everything we can to right-size it to make it efficient.
Okay, and then, phase two, that little green area, is that the admin area, between the two blue?
All the way up at the top, that's the farm area.
No, over on the right-hand side. I don't see admin on that.
This area, ma'am?
Yeah.
So there would be admin down near the colonnade in both options. So there's space for kind of administrative in each building since they're decoupled. And so that little green piece in between the media building and the 7th and 8th grade building that you mentioned is just that. It's just a little green space that the students can utilize.
Okay, all right, thank you. Oh, wait, one more question.
Yes, ma'am.
What are y'all, when you price this, what are you pricing per square foot?
So it varies a little bit phase by phase, just because some options have more exterior wall and others don't. I want to say, and I don't have my cheat sheet with me, that it averages between 380 and 400.
Okay, I was just wondering, now the state went up to 289, but that's a long way from
Yeah.
what it's costing to build that.
Historically, we've seen that the state funds you 40 to 50% of what it really takes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Ms. Wedge?
Definitely love the options that's going to save some money and
Those are
less,
always good
right,
options.
and less portables. Although, I've had a chance to go to classes in portables and I didn't perish. So, but I would definitely like to keep that off, the property if we could, and especially to save cost. And I can't think of the name of that street, but the street that you drive to go to the 6th grade campus. I mean, if at all possible, we can figure out, like, with those phase 1 and 2 about how to keep the traffic off. Is that Fairway? Is that right? And then I'm sure the neighborhood behind the school would definitely appreciate that a lot. So I'm all for that. I just now let me ask you this. Ms. McLean asked a lot of what I had questions about, but in the event that we have to be without a gym for 6th and 7th, 8th grade campuses, we would be able to use, will the students at that grade level be able to maybe use this one over here that would kind of maybe funnel over to a different gym space or what have you?
I mean,
Is that possibly an option? Like, if we don't have a game or whatever, will they be able to use it, say,
the
for
high school
example,
gym,
if the,
or
huh?
you mean they'd be able to use the gym at the high school
Yeah.
facility?
For PE classes?
Well, no, I'm not talking about for PE classes, I'm sure, but I'm talking about, like, if they have a game or whatever, and this
I
gym
mean,
may be
we'll-
out of
we'll-
capacity or whatever.
We'll have to see in the timing of all of that if it causes that kind of disruption. I mean, we could move to our elementary schools have
Okay,
gyms.
gotcha.
I mean, we've got options because we don't want to disrupt what's going on at the high school, but we could utilize some after school stuff in our gyms and all our elementary schools that
Okay.
aren't necessarily being utilized.
And the phase 1 and phase 2 both have the 6th grade building being demoed at the very end. And so for a period of time, you'll be able to use the gym that's at
Gotcha,
the bottom
okay.
of the
That's
6th
right, the
grade.
6th grade has
So
the
there is
gym,
still a gym that could be PE and such, but no bleachers. I don't think there's there, but they could still use that as a PE.
Gotcha,
For
okay.
competitions.
And
that,
so the
yes.
traffic from that that street that comes to the 6th grade, that will be eliminated? And
Ideally, yes.
okay, great, okay.
Or you could put it around the building with that side street that you talked about.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
That's part of the
Yeah.
thought of connecting that west drive that goes behind the cafeteria.
Mhm.
No matter what we do, that needs to link up to the parking lots on the north, just to utilize it. Like right now, the only person who can drive down there is in a big Cisco truck. And if we're paying for the asphalt, we ought to make it useful for more than one person. So the hope is that even if some passenger vehicles have to come from the north from the street, when we do buses and things, they can loop the whole property because we have that long bus loop. And so if that connects to the northern lot and then down that west drive, that'll
And all of
open up
this
a
will
lot.
be ADA compliant and all that kind of stuff as far as anybody, we have students.
Buildings and
Mhm.
facilities, yes.
And outside ramps, okay, just making sure.
I mean, it's going to be tricky, and that's part of what this next study is on that west side of the building, slope drops off really quick. And so along that western drive, how we get people down from road surface up to the courtyard level is something we're gonna have to study. It can be done, it's ramps or stairs or whatnot, but it's just, that's the next level of study of how do we fit 70 feet of ramps to get you up 4 feet. So,
Gotcha, okay. Thank you.
yes, ma'am.
Okay. Dr. Polisky, do you have,
No, ma'am.
oh, I'm sorry.
I'm
Ms.
sorry.
Walker.
So just to kind of clarify, I was speaking to a gentleman a few months ago when we were in the Hot Springs conference. So we have to have a tornado shelter as well with the new build, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes, ma'am.
So would that be something like a gym can be utilized as a actual tornado shelter as well? And is that something that we can also utilize if we have classrooms attached to said gymnasium or auxiliary gym / tornado shelter / multi-purpose? You understand
Yes,
what I'm
that's right.
asking?
That's
So
right.
there's a handful of ways to handle the shelter-in-place requirements, whether it's taking a gym and hardening it, or if it's going through and hardening some of the corridors where there's safe spaces. And so that's just in the next level of study about where do we get the most efficient use of our dollars.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, I just wanted to kind of touch base on that. Very good.
And Ms. Williams, real quick, if I may, I do have a caveat to that component. Is there extra funding or extra rebates or whatever for
Unfortunately,
doing?
not at this time.
Okay.
It was a good try, though. We asked the
I'm
same
all
question.
for trying.
There's no coupons.
My only question would be, in that you're giving us a choice of 1 and 2,
Yes, ma'am.
that, could you redesign the show us like showing 2 gyms?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what'll have to happen, because a school of this size, the same as the high school, we have a practice gym and a regular gym, where they can use either. So that means it may not have to be a full court, but as an architect, you would understand that maybe you have your main one and then you have your practice gym, where it's, if you have 2 different grade levels, we have 3, 7th, and 8th,
Yes, ma'am.
that at least they would have an opportunity. You know how to be sitting up wondering, can we go PE now when it's available?
Yes, ma'am. I think that's very doable with the footprints that we have. And what I would probably do is make sure that the 2 gyms have 2 different entry positions, so that, as you mentioned, when you have 6th grade filing into one, if you have 7th and 8th grade in the other, they don't have to cross, they don't have to have the hassle.
Good point.
All right, Dr. Pileski, do you have anything?
No,
Mr.
ma'am.
Brown?
Just want to proceed with, our recommendation is to proceed with the next steps of looking at phase 1 and phase 2 as more of a deep dive, and having some community forums to update the public on everything that's been shared. Ms.
McLean?
With the 4 meetings that we would have in October, let's say that we go with, are we going to use phase 1, or pick a particular phase
Yes,
that we're going to be presenting?
correct. I think what we're proposing is, we're actually suggesting phase 1, but the study is looking at phase 1 and phase 2. And so we could also put that out on the survey as well, to get public input. I do believe that's the recommendation, Mr. Brown.
Yes, to study phase 1 and phase 2, yes.
So we won't have any of a deeper dive into this until after those 4 meetings?
That's correct. So the notion here is probably come back next month at our workshop, probably give an update. Hey, we've gone through all this, and then come do a preliminary, and then at the regular board meeting, do even a deeper dive, share all the survey results. We've done all this. This is all the information for you to consider if the board so, to go for a millage in March, or you table that, tell us to do more forums, come back in March to determine if you want to go for November.
So when we're having these 4 meetings or 4 forums in October, I think people that will come to those meetings will probably be asking specific things that maybe are questions like I was asking about. Can we have 4 gyms in there? Or is it going to be oriented this way or that, when those things really won't be determined until,
I
the
think you are
feedback.
correct about that, but it's important to gather that feedback to understand what our different communities find important, because we're going to find in the programming of this, it's a process of give and take between what we have to have by the state versus what we want operationally versus what our community demands for how they intend to use it. And we're going to have to balance all those things. And not everybody's going to win all the things they want, and so it's going to be part of the process. And so getting the feedback's important so we engage how critical that is.
so in the forum meetings that we have, we want people to be asking questions about, well, where could this go, or could this be different, or,
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, we'll take all the information people want to give us.
okay. That's great, because everybody then can have their input in there. And then if we did proceed, they could still have input later
Yes, ma'am.
as we do the deep dive on specifics.
Yes, ma'am. That's the intent. That's what makes it a public forum.
That's great.
So would it be recommended that maybe we fill out a wish list for those individuals that attend the forums?
Sure.
So they can put what they desire out of the new school?
Yes, ma'am. So when we do these public engagement sessions, whether it's for a park or for a school, there's almost always a comment section, right? And so their comments could be things they're concerned about, things they want to see, things they haven't seen. And we want to collect all those comments and put them together, and that begins to give us the ammunition to make informed decisions.
Were there any questions?
Yeah, is the green space we talked about in phase 2, is that big enough for another gym? Or is that smaller than it looks? It looks like a pretty good space.
You could fit a basketball gym there. I would caution against putting another building in that place. Outside wall costs the most. Space in the middle of the building costs less. And so a better solution would be to make the gym building larger than to build a whole separate facility. And so, like, if you look in that 2-phase no portables option, there's a little bit of room around the gym. There's a little bit of space between it and the cafeteria. So I think we can be pretty creative about where we stuff stuff away. And so once we nail down, like, this is the number of gyms we need, these are the ones that need bleachers, these are the ones that don't, we can really find the right spot for it.
Okay, Mr. Brown, as a closure, in case someone just got on air, would you please explain in summary about this is simply a proposal that there were steps? Would you do that as a summation?
Yes. So what we're doing here is we're just reviewing information about a proposed middle school project. These are just 30,000-foot preliminary ideas, construction plan ideas. And we were reviewing whether we could, through the use of portables or other phasing, shorten construction time and make the projects more cost efficient. And so that's what Mr. Meyer has done, is brought these options to us. And the two that are recommended here in the red are the least amount of construction duration time and the least expensive. So what we're planning to do is to take those two options and to dive deeper into those, let them do more analysis on those two options. And we're going to take our information to the community, let them know information about this project, and we're also going to conduct a community survey, and we're going to come back at your November workshop. We'll bring some information back to you at that point on progress that has been made, and then at the November regular meeting, if it's the intention of the board to have a millage election in March of 2024, there would need to be a vote to have that at the regular November meeting. If the desire of the board is to have the millage election question in November of 2024, you would have to have an official vote of the board approving that millage election to be on the at your July regular board meeting. So those are sort of the items that are facing us now. Those are the next steps, what we plan to do. And again, these are not set in, these designs are not set in stone. 30,000 foot view ideas. As they dive into that, they take suggestions from the board, suggestions from the community. They do their analysis, their deeper dive. These things may change. But overall, this is sort of the design that we're trying to adhere to. So,
Okay, Dr. Reddy.
How will the community find out about the forums and the options, the dates and times?
Yeah, we'll begin to
go.
push that out ASAP as soon as possible in multiple venues so that everybody knows that they're happening. Push them out of the top 5. I did have one point of clarity, Mr. Brown. In our forums, will we just be talking about the middle school, or will we also talking about other projects? Because we have talked about other projects such as Old Main, or maybe we just need some clarity from the
Sure.
board.
no, that can actually, I think that would fit well in here as we could identify the projects that we
District's
have, the
priorities.
district priority projects, and then we can say middle school's on there, top priority, and that's the project that we're discussing. But yes, and I think our community survey will take into account all of our listed projects and get public input into and about their support of those projects and how they would prioritize those projects.
And Dr. Paluski, real quick, I think that it would be important to maybe go back and acknowledge, from what I understand, there's some bad or ill feelings maybe about what was promised initially and what happened there.
Sure.
Neither one of us were in that deal, and I don't know the whole gamut of it, but it may be helpful to go back and acknowledge what transpired. And we did get some stuff done as far as elementary buildings out of it, but
Sure.
The middle school,
Sure,
from
we
what I
can-
understand, was promised and it wasn't. It didn't come to fruition.
It was
It was
on
the
that
base-
promise
yeah.
to be fixed, and we haven't.
Mr.
In the baseball field.
Mr. Beardsley is the historian on
He
that.
is, and he
So
will be with
can
us. And I
provide
think
that.
he's
Good,
mentioned
good.
that several times on if funding was available, we would do X. But I think giving a historical perspective from the last time is a great idea.
You were there.
I have one more question. I was just wondering if y'all have someone, I don't even know how this works, so this is a crazy question, but there's people that go in and they look at plans from a safety standpoint and say this should be changed because this would allow an intruder to be here or whatever. Do y'all have someone on some employee that looks
We
at
do.
things in that way, or would we
So-
have to have somebody look at a plan that,
We certainly can have someone look at a plan. We have general life safety and health wellness stuff within the office. That's what we're trained to do. There's certain kind of guidelines and regulations that we can apply to the design. But typically, with school districts and new school structures, really in the last 10, 15 years, you see more and more third-party consultants brought on as part of that design process. As an additional service that can be offered. And then certainly when this gets to like setting out the legitimate school plan and we talk about locking systems and access control, that's something we would be glad to offer and provide and add to our team.
And in the
Thank you.
past, we've engaged the police department. members of that department and then the fire department as well to review the plans, to sit down with us and talk about egress and safety and intruders and this kind of thing. And so those kind of ideas were incorporated into the elementary schools and into the high schools. So we will certainly do that again and engage those emergency type facility faculties in the facility.
We'll ensure that
Further questions?
Chief Finks is on the, as he's a part of that.
Right.
Are there further questions?
Yeah,
Board?
What are we gonna ask on our community surveys? Is it just gonna be, do you wanna see the middle school replaced? What are we asking? Do you know? Have you
Well,
all
we're
seen-
we're gonna have questions that cover district priorities, and then we're going to ask about support of a millage. Do you have kids in the school? Do you not have kids in the school?
Okay.
What are your
So it's gonna be a
priorities?
pretty thorough
How would you
Yes.
prioritize?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. Thank you.
Will there be some sort of survey at the forums, or will they have a form that they can just write things down, or have we even thought through that yet?
We'll probably just have a
What-
form, I think, or, I don't know if we want to mix surveys. That would be my recommendation. We'll collect that feedback on the ground. We could collect that virtually. That is one way to do it. But I think the survey, we want to go through the forums and then send out the link, give a period of time, so we can come back and brief the board.
You know, we did have some technology in the district where every student has a clicker, and you ask something, then everybody chooses their answer, and it
Yeah.
flashes up there.
Like a Kahoot.
I don't know if we could utilize something like that or not, but that'd be pretty cool.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm gonna keep my comment to myself and I'll say it later.
Okay. If there are no further questions, Mr. Brown, Target,
Mr. Brown, Mr. Myers,
thank you
thank you so much.
very much.
Mr. Brown.
Thank y'all.
All right.
It looks good, thank you.
Great.
I appreciate the hard work you've placed into this.
We're excited. I have a 5th grader and a 3rd grader, and I live like 2 blocks away, so I have a vested interest.
Nice, I love that.
Glad to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Madam President, members of our Board of Education, our last item is our annual conversation on school board governance. So I would like to welcome Mr. Joe Quinn, as we've been on this ongoing professional development about school board governance in small bites. And so, Mr. Quinn,
Hi.
welcome.
Hi.
It's late, you're hungry,
And get in.
so I'll do the short version. It's funny, I was sitting here in an empty room
Yeah.
watching you. I'm always struck by that, oh, you didn't tell us this, or we don't know enough about this, or how does your communication work? And tonight you've asked probably 40 questions about a new facility, which is really the grunt work in the early stages when a board does this, and you did that in front of 40 empty seats. There's always this contradiction. You don't tell us enough, but the idea that people don't come to the meetings and access the communication tools you use, I always find rather interesting. I also find it interesting, being a 6-year school board veteran, that you'll probably get more questions, is the facility going to be ready for the state basketball tournament, than you will ever get about reading at grade level, which is just, I guess, it is life maybe, but what people pay attention to, and I'm sure you'll get a lot of questions about the state basketball tournament and is everything ready to go. Tonight also reminds me, when I went on a school board, piece of advice a veteran gave me was, when you're a parent, you worry about the schools your kids attend, and that's it. That's your myopic view. And when you're a school board member, you have to worry about all schools. And I'm really reminded of how most people don't understand sometimes that your job is to worry about all of the schools. I want to talk a little bit about some of the themes we talked about, through this past year. Accountability and world class. you can't make anything world-class without accountability. And you can't have accountability without having change. But when you start to really change things, then you have people who are asked to change sometimes want to be the victim. And then they want to tell you, you know, that they want to go to the media and say, I am the victim. When in many cases, you're just asking people to be more accountable and to do the job that they are paid for and to, you know, show up on time, deliver quality work, sort of be a role model for kids. But that's what accountability, we talked a lot in the early stages of this about accountability. And you know, the more you're in the news sometimes, I think about what accountability really means and who gets treated sympathetically versus who gets to wear the black hat in terms of how the dialogue in the community is framed. The things we talked about last year, I think, are still the things that matter, especially on a night like tonight where you're talking about sort of issues like, you know, an athletic issue, a new school issue. It really doesn't change. Clear vision, set your goals, monitor progress, focus on student achievement, positive relationships, and connect with the community. And I think the other thing we talked a lot about is speaking to the community with one voice. I mean, I certainly think if a school is going into your district and that's far away from your district, it's a little bit different what you would be asked if a new school and where it's going to be positioned. But I think speaking with one voice in an angry world matters more than ever. And we talked a lot about that last year. There's also, I think, we're living in an angry world, and people do a lot of things to express anger in ways that don't necessarily make it easy to be an unpaid school board member. As I've reminded you before, you know, city council members receive a stipend for serving. I'm not saying anyone ever really thinks about being on a school board to get compensation, but you do this and you miss dinner and you go home late after a long day at work and you're a little bit worn out, and then you take heat for very often either operating the district just as it should be operated or simply doing the right thing. And I also think, I mentioned reading at grade level. You know, the other thing I think people forget is you don't wake up one day and say, oh, let's for the sake of change things at a particular elementary school. You do that because there are some performance issues there, and you're trying to better serve children by getting them a better education, by improving where they are going to school, which is fundamentally what the superintendent is paid for and you are elected to do. You know, now all of this will be more relevant than ever as you start to consider a millage and when to do a millage. You know, we live in a world now where there's a perception that if you do November, more people are likely to vote against anything, which is kind of sad. So now as you go into the millage discussion, you have to say, well, this is what we have been doing with your resources, and this is why we need more resources to hire teachers, to have better facilities, the whole thing sometimes gets out of hand a little bit, the anger that can go with doing, again, what you're supposed to do, which is, when needed, refer a millage to the people of the community. And that is also something that is about you living up to your vision and your accountability and community relationships. Again, sitting in the empty room tonight, thinking about, you know, don't succumb to external pressure. I think the reality of being on a school board is you know the issues more than someone who parachutes in and tries to look at one issue on one day and just form an opinion that's not really based on how it works. But not succumbing to external pressure, negative comments, micromanaging, and assigning blame. And I'm going to say again tonight what I said the last time when I had the privilege to be here with you and be the last person in the room. You've made a lot of changes the past couple of years, and I think you should be really proud of that. And if I'm the only one and the last one that's going to remind you of that, you've changed how the district functions because you are now having real conversations about where the district should be headed. And you had the courage to hire a superintendent who wants to impact real change. And I know that some of the small stuff that I've been able to help with, we're going to come back to you with the long-term strategic plan and talk to you about how to show that to the community and how to make it understandable. I noticed Dustin, more than ever, has been aggressively posting on Facebook and working hard to tell your story. I think the superintendent agrees we got to rethink about the resources he has, but I really think he's working hard right now when I see how he's posting every day to put a human face on the story. So accountability is what I wanted to talk about tonight, but then when I watched you ask long, lengthy questions about a new facility, that's what your job is, but that is, in fact, the part of your job that you have an empty room. So keep up doing what you're doing. I'm just here for the short close. We're not going to do the long slide version of this we used to do, but I think you're changing the district, and you need to keep that in mind. And you need to stay, have each other's backs and stay focused, and that's it. That's what I got tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And how do we evaluate ourselves?
I think that's
It's a part of the Arkansas School Board Association.
I think that's a great question. I think one way you evaluate yourself is when you have, the superintendent's goals that he gave you in January,
Right.
and then you go to renew him at the end of the year. By looking at those goals, did he click on his goals and meet them? Because if he met them, you really are meeting, your goals also. I think that's one way you evaluate yourself. I think the other way you evaluate yourself is you used to have some rather turbulent, contentious board meetings that would sort of have anger, and you really don't right now. I mean, you have some, right? But I think you brought sort of a dialogue back that we are a unified school board, and we are here to improve the district, and we are working together to do that, and we are staying out of the superintendent's business. And I think I would evaluate yourself successfully for that. I would also, just taking tonight, you're willing and able and about to have a millage discussion, There are a lot of school districts sometimes that will complain about budget problems, but then it's been 20 years since they ran a millage election. So, I think the fact that you're willing to discuss millage and willing to discuss the facilities you need, I would say that's indicative that you have improved it. And I think you're respectful to each other, and I think that matters. So, but I think that then the other thing is, now that you're in a groove, when January is in sight now, you really dig in and focus on the superintendent's goals for next year and agree on what they are. And if he's meeting them at the end of the year, that means you're meeting your goals at the end of the year.
Very well said. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Go home and eat. Watch Thursday night.
Well, have we talked about doing another Saturday deal at one point again? So, what was it? There was a retreat. That's the word I was looking for.
Right, and I think that's one thing that we would have to talk about is what would you like that focus to be? And I know that one thing that I've learned is that the board, rather than spend 8 hours on one Saturday, if we do this in smaller chunks, seems to be more beneficial. But it also means that we could do a workshop where we spend time on the strategic plan. We'll present that to you, but we could chunk it in small parts. I'm certainly not opposed to doing. I've also learned with our board, if we're going to do a retreat, it's only till noon on Saturday and not all day. So, but I'm here to serve the board, serve this community, and I will certainly take feedback. I'm just learning that the board has enjoyed the professional development for Mr. Quinn in small doses once a month, rather than.
That is true, especially with some things that may be out there. And I always say that we understand and know the interworkings of what's going on, whereas the public may not. And And I think I said from day one to you, you know, it's some that movie Drumline, one band, one sound.
Sure.
And I'm a firm believer in that. And that's how I used to always teach my kids, as far as this house has to run as one band, one sound. So I think that it's definitely important for us to be cohesive and strong together. And, you know, at times there's things said that I don't necessarily agree with or like. However, I do respect it. And, you know, everybody has their opinion. And we're one of 7. So I've enjoyed it.
I have a question more or less for you, because you're in communication background and ex-board member.
Drag that microphone in a little bit, will you?
Would you like
I'm
a
half
part-time
deaf.
job?
Okay, sorry. So, question, you having the communication background and board member background, how do we reach parents who work in social media / communications that state that they were uninformed when we blasted the information last time, and how do we get that reached? Because I hear that we're going to use multiple sources, which we used multiple sources last time. So how do you reach the unreachable is my question for you.
I think there are always going to be a small number of loud voices who claim they didn't get A, B, or C. And you focus on doing a better job getting information to the 75 or 80% of people who really want it. And, you know, you're never going to have a perfect world where you open Facebook and don't see things that rub you the wrong way.
Sure.
My last school board election, my wife and daughter, I had to tell them, please stop looking at Facebook. It was really ugly. And, but so you're always going to have people say, well, you didn't tell us this.
Right.
But you have, look, your meetings are posted on a website. You have agendas that are legally put out in advance. You have, when you gather in a room to get, you know, you do all the right things. But I do think there's a valid discussion of what kind of resources your communication director has. There are different things you can do in terms of if you have, it's not uncommon for a district this size to have one communication staffer who just focuses on the digital work. I think you could do things like the superintendent's message is done on video instead of the top 5 items of the week, and all of that is doable. And, you know, you can go out and tell positive stories, but you just, I think the basic answer is you just got to keep fighting your own, pushing your own message out there every day, which I actually think Dustin right now is really, really attempting to do, but
Yeah,
but it's
definitely.
a question of, but look, we live in a world that, you know, angry voices are angrier than ever, and generally they have some bad information, and they're going to run with that.
Loud and wrong.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or they're going to have some type of conspiracy thought.
Yeah. All right, I'm good. I just
Okay.
using his professional opinion.
Yeah, but remember also, you are ambassadors for the district, and everywhere you go in your day-to-day life, you have the opportunity to sort of, hey, here's what we're doing. You know, I love to call it an elevator speech, you know, and you do this at home when you're alone in the shower, but like, if you're going to take 60 seconds and tell me what you're doing that works right now, rehearse that. Just rehearse that when you're alone, in the car, wherever. But again, be able to sort of deliver that 60 or 90 seconds on the good things the district is doing.
That's good stuff.
Because people need to hear that from you.
Yeah. Good deal.
Okay, we officially dismiss.
Thank you, Mr. Quinn.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Quinn.
Mr. Quinn.